Yes, and someone who's really been taking me over lately. That's Ornette Coleman, one of the most original jazz musicians I've ever heard in my life. Basically, he's the man who invented free jazz. Like before John Coltrane even came around and tore it up in 1961, Ornette Coleman kind of already tore it up in 1959, and he did it again in 1961. So this is really a genius man of the saxophone, and I think what he did here is different than Miles Davis. It's different than any other jazz artist, and I think that like this instantly just comes out in how strange it is. It ultimately feels very, very eccentric. Um, Albums like Something Else, the music of Ornette Coleman in the year 1958 is just very strange. And it's not in a dense kind of sense. It's just strange in a way that's just like, whoa, like what in the world? It feels like an invisible force is taking over here. There's a lot of interesting piano work and a lot of strange solos. And again, this is 1958. It literally just feels like experimental music is being invented in a lot of ways in the avant garde sense. But it's the shape of jazz that come in the year 1959 and that would really take over as a grand masterpiece because this album perfectly just kind of captures something of like an underground sort of atmosphere. Like, and it really feels like just radical and different than anything else I've ever heard because this isn't a jazz album that doesn't feature piano. That's what makes it different. And the piano is one of my favorite instruments of the jazz genre, but this is one that doesn't have it. It's just pure eccentricity with a hard bop in it. It's so different that I love it because you have all these other guys taken in here, like Sonny Rollins. I mean, at times, not all the entire album, but I mean, it's just using the piano is such a big part. So I mean, this is just really an original sound. It's not quite like how Charles Mingus does it. I mean, it's literally just like just Ornette Coleman's thing entirely. I mean, just try. I think his aim was to stir up the most chaos imaginable in his own refined sort of way, in his original way. I think songs like Eventually just really come through here. I mean, it just really creates something intense and emotional both at the same time. And he just had his own way as a saxophonist. It's just really coming through and making this just technically just as innovative as Kind of Blue by Miles Davis is, but more to underground since this is a lot more underground. But I mean, Focus on Sanity just embodies something very jumpy and jarring and very anxious ultimately. I think that's the atmosphere that Ornette Coleman's ahead of his time. He's very anxious in his mood and tone. And he kind of just finds something really special in that mood. One of the first musicians to really do that in a modern sense, like Lonely Woman. I mean, it's just a classic piece. It's just all the space living inside of that contingentity. Oh my gosh. This album's incredible. And I love songs like it feels like it's literally a foreshadowing even to stuff like post Love Supreme John Coltrane. It feels like it's almost building up to a lot of that, as well as like a lot of stuff like the spiritual jazz would kind of take influence from it. It's not even a spiritual jazz sound. It just sounds like I'm in a very sleazy area in the best way possible. But I'll tell you, the album Free Jazz in 1961, I think this is my favorite take on this kind of sound. I think I prefer this over Ascension by John Coltrane, as big as the bold as a statement that is, because I think that Ornette Coleman is having more fun. Like, I've never heard a more challenging sound in the way that this is just literally 1961. I mean, John Coltrane wasn't even this thinking like this. Like, Ornette Coleman was just literally like being very crazy and weird in 1961 in a way that's as weird as a lot of the late 60s in jazz would be. I mean, I've never had so much fun with such a strange sound. It's the best way I can describe it. It's about the hardest album in the world to talk about because I think just being in the moment with it is just everything. And it's the most perfect release I think Ornette Coleman ever made, most definitely. He's just so far out there, and I always have this unique sense of wonder about where the man's even coming from. It feels like he's taking a lot of influence from classical, but ultimately it's just his own kind of free jazz thing that's just rock and roll what he's doing in this album. A very sacred sound and very essential, I think, for all ears to take in at least once in their lives. So this is very powerful, and it's fun. That's the thing about it. It's more fun than John Coltrane's spirituals, and like that's. And Ornette Coleman always has fun, and like this stuff in the '70s would kind of like I've listened to some parts of the albums. None of them really struck me quite the same way as these two significant masterpieces, but those two alone warrant him as an all-time genius for what he made with Shape of Jazz, The Come, and Free Jazz. I mean, geez, and some stuff in the '70s is funky, but it's just different than the organic innovation that he laid out in his early years. And he's quite a mastermind for that alone, completely separate from any other jazz musician, any other musician in general. It's just kind of its own world entirely. And that sometimes is where the best musicians of all time kind of shine. They just have complete creative control, which is just, again, doing it right along Miles Davis is doing it in his own way. Same ahead of John Coltrane. So I mean, that's the same. That's Ornette Coleman. Recommend this man to anybody who's interested in like more experimental. Maybe not if the more experimental shades of jazz. If you're looking for something just completely relaxing, perhaps not. Because this is not relaxing necessarily. Ornette Coleman is anxious, and I think that anxious energy comes out perfectly through these two in particular noted albums. So yeah, highly recommend it.